Superman Lost, issue 1, Christopher Priest writing with Carlo Pugilane on the art. So, Priest's had an interesting history for us on this show where we've kind of appreciated what he does, and he's obviously very good at his craft. He's very in-depth and very dense with his writing. But it's also kind of been a bit of a double-edged sword where we have ended up dropping some of his books before. I've dropped both his Black Adam and his Deathstroke, and I read a good 30+ issues of that Deathstroke run.
Yeah.
I read all of his Justice League stuff, but it was probably the weakest of all that, just because, but it was easier to read because it was Justice League. So I was very curious going into this, that it had a strong concept, the concept being that Superman leaves to go and do something, and when he comes back, seemingly right away, from everyone else's perspective, he's actually been gone from his perspective for 20 years because of timey-wimey stuff. And it's all about sort of dealing with that and telling the story of what happened in those 20 years. So interesting concept. So came into it optimistic, but not really sure how I'd feel about it. So how did you feel about issue 1?
So we talk about Priest being real dense. Here, though, I feel like that style, I don't know, maybe because this is a mini and he's writing for the mini, he doesn't have to write for the ongoing. It wasn't dense in the way that like Deathstroke and stuff was, but there was still a lot of story that he got through in this, but I didn't feel it in the pages. So like it moved, like the story was very engaging. Yeah, I like that. I like what the story has set up in the first issue a lot.
Yeah, I think this first issue was really good. It was good because it focused, it starts off with like, something's going on, Superman saves someone, and Lois and him are having just some sort of banter about what she's writing, and it's going back and forth. But then it's like, something's came up, and there's a lot of conversation about how, she keeps being distracted by her work, and he keeps getting called away to do stuff, and then he gets called away to do something, and it's like, I'll be back, whenever. And then he comes back, she wakes up and he's already back, and she's like, you're back quite quick, and she's sort of talking to him, and Superman's just standing there and not responding to anything she's saying. It's like he's shell shocked. He's just he's something's not quite right. At
first it looks like he's kind of frozen in time, right? And then the art goes to, it's like he's got a 1,000-yard stare, and you're just like, what is going on?
Yeah, she's just like sauntering around as if everything's normal, and then she sort of moves around him, and eventually, he kind of fesses up that he's been gone for 20 years. Like, as far as his experience has been, he's been gone all that time.
Yeah.
So I thought I thought it was really smart to sort of set this from her perspective, where we just see him go and come back like it's nothing, and like, oh shit, something really big happened, and he's been gone all this time.
And now he's going to recount the story to Lois.
Yeah, that seems to be the framing device for what a lot of this is going to be. Maybe there's some still stuff that'll happen post the trip, in the present day part of the story, but it does seem like at least going forward for this first chunk of it, we're going to be doing a lot of the story of what happened in that 20-year gap.
And there's a kind of like a close-up of the art to where when he says that he's been gone for 20 years and his face, not that it looks like it's aged, but it looked like Christopher Reeve to me, and specifically in that panel. So I don't know if that's on purpose, right? If that's something they're trying to draw attention to, but it's definitely a different look for Superman, just by a little bit.
Well, it's not the panel that he says 20 years in, because his face isn't in that panel. It's over his shoulder, but it's around that time. But yeah, I was not expecting this to be him back. I thought this was us following him as what happens, and not him being back and recounting the story to Lois. So that was a nice spin. Yeah, I think this works better, because like her shock that he's just spent 20 years away from her, even though she's not experienced it, the fact that he's come back, and it's like someone who's went away to war and came back and they're a changed person. That's kind of the vibe that you get from this. And Bruce shows up, and Bruce is like surprised that he's back, because Bruce is clearly, as we find out, he's here to tell Lois that Superman's went missing and they've lost him. But he's already back, so it's like,
he's already back before they got a chance to tell him.
So, then they go into, what happened, and they start telling the story that Superman was called to help the Justice League. There was this like crashed. I mean, they think it's a submarine at first, but it turns out to be a crashed alien ship that's in the bottom of the ocean near somewhere.
They respond, and the Justice League says that it's a Chinese sub has went down, and they're China sending their military down to get it, and then they start to get down there. They realize that no, it's not a Chinese sub, that it's a spaceship, it's this craft, and there's like an issue with the warp drive, and it's starting to cause like the singularity event. And this is where I kind of, not that I tuned out, but it started to go super hard sci-fi,
oh no, this was great. No, let me jump in here because I love this. So
there you go.
Basically, this was like a singularity is a black hole, right? So
yes.
What this is saying is that this ship's got an engine that creates a black hole, so the ship can jump from one part of space to another.
Yes.
So it's how it's getting around outer space. So, and they talk about the event horizon. So literally, the ship in Event Horizon also. I don't like that movie. I think that movie's shit for a lot of other reasons.
But Event Horizon is something in science, right? It's like that's where the horizon line meets time or something. I'm not that well versed in astrophysics.
But if you know that movie, you're probably going to think of it when they start talking about all this shit. Especially since they're talking about a core and it's unstable and it's going to do something. And Superman goes in to try and deal with it, because if it does go unstable, it may end up swallowing the entire planet and ruin everything. So someone has to go in, and it has to be him, because he's one of the few people who will actually maybe survive what he's about to go do.
Withstand the effects of the warp drive or the drive on it. And I do like that, they said that it would tear Diana and Jean or Arthur apart, but Superman has Kryptonian physiology.
Well, I think they say that Jean, because I think Jean says he's going to come in with them, and Superman says, "No, stay back and help them if I fail." Like,
because I need you. I need you. You're the backup plan.
Yeah. Right? So I don't think it'll tear apart Jean.
There's another person that he said though.
Yeah, it's the same with Hal Jordan. He says to him that the Green Lantern ring might be able to contain it until you can get it away, but that's a plan B.
Yeah.
So again, he has to stay back. So they really set up that it has to be him that goes and does this, and he goes in, and much like with him returning to Lois, it doesn't follow Superman into the core. We just see the rest of the Justice League on the outside, like they're holding on to the lasso because they've got him tethered to that, and they're trying to follow what's going on. But we're seeing everything from their perspective. It's them looking at the readings, seeing it be unstable, the water starting to get into a vortex, all that stuff. And then they're like, shit, okay, he's disappeared. They pull the lasso back and he's gone. And that pretty much just is where we leave off. And it's just, we see one shot of Superman in space wherever the ship
wherever that drive,
wherever the ship teleported to, that's where Superman's ended up. And that's our cliffhanger for the end of issue 1. And there's one quick panel of Lois reacting to this and looking kind of pissed, and So, and Superman keeps saying that Lois is right to be angry with him, and that would maybe imply to me that, because I think given what we've seen, it's not really anyone's fault, but the fact that Superman's saying that he needs to be the one that she's mad at makes me think he's going to make some choices that are going to extend what this trip is. He could have probably came back much quicker if he didn't choose to, save an entire civilization.
Stop and help people along the way, because that's just who he is.
So,
well, because at first I thought he was talking about with the Justice League, don't be mad at them. They couldn't stop me from going. But then, when you look at the perspective, it is probably along the lines of what you're talking, where he would have been back, 5 years before, but he got caught up in a galactic civil war.
Oh, I think it's much more than that. I think he could have been back in 1 year maybe, and extended to 20 because he couldn't help but save whoever was out there. I think what's interesting though is that it doesn't give us any hint as to what this story out there is, other than that little nugget that we've just talked about.
Yeah. That he's lost and he's seen some stuff.
Yeah, he's just in space. We see him out there somewhere. He's literally just lost, and that's where we're going to pick up. I think what I was really impressed by this issue is that so much of it is told from the perspective of all the other characters. It's the Justice League when Superman goes out to do the thing. It's Lois's perspective, and it does a really good job before he leaves of just giving us a night of their life, of this is what they're like when they're living together. He's making, he's trying to fix the toaster. She's trying to work on a story, and they're sort of bantering and making fun of little jokes at each other. It's just this slice of life stuff, so that you feel it when he disappears, and then the shock of I've been gone for 20 years, and not to her perspective, but to him,
she blinked.
This is a traumatizing thing that it's like he's been in prison for 20 years, and he's finally seen her again. So this is a big moment for him, whereas for her, it's just, oh, I woke up after a nap. There you are.
Yeah. Well, I also like that the intro part of it, too, is, it opens with this car chase, and this other car gets caught up and it gets ran up off the road, and you come to find out that the person in that car was a Senate aide, and the trunk had like over $1 million in it. And so Lois wants to know what that story is all about, and like, it's how she's digging into this as he's digging at the toaster. And there's just this, not a back and forth, but like you said, the banter.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's thematic connection with that opening little story. This idea that he goes to save someone who's in a car that's gone off the edge of a cliff or whatever, and it turns out there's tons of money, and now this woman's been accused of running away with this money, but she claims she didn't know it was there. I wonder if the main story will thematically kind of like, just work with that.
Play into that, because it's almost like these actions have ripples, right? And like the ripple of him, stopping the car chase and causing this lady to go off the thing, but saving her and have the $1 million led to the senator to have to resign, and it leads to a change in Congress and all this other. I wonder if that's going to be similar to Superman going into that.
Because there's spaceship. Yeah, you're right. There's a little bit of like talk from Lois about how this will give like a one-person majority to the opposition because this senator had to step down, kind of thing.
Right.
And I think just little details in the art, like they chose to have Lois have the hair colors in her hair throughout a lot of this scene. Again, just to show that this is normal, everyday
home life.
Yeah. So the shock of this big galactic thing happening where he's been gone, Interstellar style for like.
Yeah.
So long. I mean, it's the inverse of that, because in Interstellar, it's the opposite, where he comes back. He's the same age, but the kids have grown up. This is the opposite, where he's experienced time and she hasn't, along with everyone else. And he would look older. Maybe he looks a little bit older, but he's Superman, so he's not.
Right. He ages differently.
He's not geriatric,
Right. But yeah, just these things have ripples, and like his now. Him being lost wherever he is going to have the ripples because he is Superman, in that same way. But no, it was very good storytelling. I really like the art.
I think that's what's interesting about it, though, is that it's not ripples to Earth, because the Earth's not experienced time without him. But it's
ripples to the universe. Wherever he's at, he's going to cause,
Oh, sure, no, but I'm looking at the opposite way around, where this experience has ripples on him. So for him, his life has changed, but the world is like, it's the next day. Right. So it's interesting when you flip it around like that. Like, okay, so how does he respond differently to things because he's been gone, because he's lost this time, because maybe he feels guilty about whatever happened out there, so on. It's an interesting concept to play with.
Well, and I was gonna say with the art too, that it is very steady. Like used to seeing I gotta look at his name when I say Pagulayan. There we go. Art in Deathstroke. So, but seeing like this other side of the Justice League, like doing Justice League stuff, all the characters look really, really good.
Yeah, it looks it almost looks a little bit Silver Age, because it's very bold colors, a little bit flat, very sort of traditional. It's not like it's not going for a super moody representation of them or anything.
No, they're very in the light and very bright, and we get them all. Even Bruce, when Bruce shows up as Bruce to talk to, he's not Batman. It's Bruce Wayne. There's an air to him that is not menacing. So, but I thought really, really good out the gate first issue for something like this.
Yeah, it intrigued me as to what the story is going to be. This actual story of him out there for 20 years. Like, what is it? What does he do in that time? We've got 10 issues total. We've already had one now, so we have 9 issues to tell that story of what this 20-year time period was. I'm curious to see what that is. I'm curious to see how this affects Superman now that he's back, because that has to be something we delve into, is like, how has this affected him being gone this long?
Right.
And just how that maybe changes his and Lois's relationship a little bit, or whatever. I think there's some interesting things to explore, which is cool.
For sure.
Yeah, and they are solid. Pugilian's a solid hand, and he nails the facial expressions, when Bruce comes to talk to Lois, and she's obviously kind of upset at this point for the rest of the issue. You can kind of see that on her face. Superman looking very stoic and kind of shell-shocked when he comes back. All these things are kind of nailed. and it contrasts nicely to the way they all look in the start of the issue when they're just like in their 90s and dressing gowns talking about work, where it's more casual and relaxed. So it nails that, I think. The action's solid enough, but it's the smaller moments with the characterizations that I think it really does well at. So, all right, what are you rating Superman Lost issue 1?
I'm gonna give this an 8.5.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think 8.5 feels about right to me. It tickled the curiosity just enough without being, super exceptional, but really solid.